Allora, buongiorno a tutti. Io sono Lelio Simi, sono giornalista freelance, da qualche mese ho anche fondato insieme ad altri miei 4 colleghi Data Media Hub, che è un sito che si occupa di media e legata all'informazione in Italia. Grazie di essere qui, siamo all'ultimo giorno di festival. E aspettiamo un attimo che entri un po' di gente. No, iniziamo. Come avete visto, il titolo di oggi è su Disqus. Disqus è una piattaforma di gestione dei commenti online. E abbiamo qui Daniel Ha, che è il suo fondatore, uno dei 2 fondatori, il CEO. E con Daniel parleremo un po' della sua esperienza su Disqus, di come ha raggiunto 1 miliardo di utenti unici al mese, ma sarà anche l'occasione di parlare un po' della sua esperienza, ma anche di alcuni argomenti legati a quello che è l'attività di Disqus. Quindi le comunità online, la discussione online e tutto quello che è legato, come dire, a quello che è lo sviluppo delle comunità online. Io inizierei subito con una prima domanda a Daniel su cosa è Disqus, come si è sviluppata, perché è una piattaforma che sicuramente, o comunque molto probabile che quasi tutti voi abbiate utilizzato, diciamo, sapendo di utilizzarla perché, come dire, siete passati attraverso la piattaforma, ma anche inconsapevolmente perché questa è una delle piattaforme più utilizzate per fare commenti, quindi è molto probabile che dentro un blog, dentro un sito di news abbiate lasciato un commento, abbiate commentato utilizzando Disqus. Quindi se Daniel intanto ci spiega cosa è, come si è sviluppata. E poi aggregherei anche un po' un'altra domanda, che noi siamo come dire, molto curiosi di sapere anche l'inizio, come Daniel. Daniel ha 27 anni, ha fondato Disqus nel 2007, quindi quando aveva 21 anni, e su questo, come dire, noi viviamo in un paese dove portare avanti, avere un'idea, portarla avanti, cercare qualcuno che ti presti attenzione è già molto difficile, qualcuno che riesca a finanziarti è molto difficile normalmente, è quasi impossibile per un giovane di 21 anni, così quanti anni aveva Daniel. Quindi mi interessava molto che Daniel parlasse anche dei primi momenti, come ha portato in giro la sua idea, come ha trovato i primi finanziatori e qual era l'idea sulla quale i finanziatori si sono convinti di puntare su lui e sul suo socio amico di una vita, puntando su questa idea, dandogli poi dei finanziamenti. Daniel.
Sorry, I was waiting for the translation to complete. All right, so what is Disqus and how we got started, essentially?
Yes.
How's this? Yeah. All right. Sorry, I was waiting for the translator to finish. So what is Disqus and how we got started? So Disqus is an online discussion platform, and the main product that we have is this embedded comment system that is used on about 3 million different communities. And that's blogs, online newspapers, digital publications of all sorts of sites. And we sort of started Disqus to be a different type of discussion platform, and this is sort of in the world of forums and message boards, that sort of stuff, rather than specifically publisher comments. But one of the first things we built as a feature was the ability to kind of embed that onto a website and to take the form that we're building and put it into a content website. And this is something that sort of took off and something that grew early on, and that's where we want to focus our traction and grow around this space. So the world of comments, I never really understood that, didn't really know anything about the journalism world or publishers, but we sort of learned about that as we were building the company. We started from a world of online communities and how to make comments feel more like these communities. Our entire premise for a long time was to make comments feel more like communities. Comments to most people are very, very broad, so you can sort of have feedback and reactions as comments, but you can also have it feel a lot more like discussions and make it feel like participation from the audience. And what we want to do is sort of build an experience where people would come there and want to participate and answer questions and really engage with whatever the content is that publishers are putting out. So we want to make it feel much more like a message board. The way we started, this was a project that my friend and I started while we were in school, and we wanted to build a new way for us to participate across these communities. For a long time, I spent a lot of time either engaging these communities or running these communities or writing software for forums. And Disqus is one of the ideas that we started. And at the time, we were about 2 years into school. We were both studying computer science and engineering, and this is the project that we ended up spending a lot of time doing. And one day I met the founder of this firm called Y Combinator, which is a sort of seed stage accelerator in the U.S. in the Silicon Valley. And we met him at a bookstore and pitched him this idea, and we're super excited about it. He invited us to apply to the program Y Combinator. So that's how we really got started for the initial seed funding for the company. It was about $15,000 or so, and as students, we thought that was a lot of money. We didn't know how to spend it all, so that was enough for us to convince ourselves to quit school and do this full time for some reason. But one of the great things about what we're doing is that we didn't need any money to get started. Building Disqus was extremely inexpensive, and really building software on the internet is really accessible to a lot of people. So we spent many months just building a variety of different versions of Disqus and putting it online and seeing what worked. And the version that we ended up putting out to users ultimately was the result of 6 or 7 different prototypes for the service.
Ma l'idea sulla quale gli investitori hanno più creduto al momento in cui poi avete cominciato ad avere investitori importanti. Ieri quando ne parlavamo, attualmente Disqus ha raccolto, io ho detto a Daniel 10 milioni di dollari, lui ha detto no, siamo oltre i 10 milioni di dollari. Quindi nella crescita, qual è stata l'idea che ha cominciato a convincere gli investitori e poi come si è sviluppata?
So initially, the idea was very simple. We're going to build the very best discussion experience possible online for these sites. So very simple. It was straightforward, a software platform. The idea that attracted additional investment in how we were building it out was the notion of a discussion network. And if we were going to build something that could ultimately be one of the most prominent ways for people to find great discussions and find the right communities online, this was a very powerful concept, and it would connect people to these topics. It would connect publishers together through this content. And the idea that we built off of was the idea of a network of super engaged audiences. And the model that we ended up doing was an advertising model. And we knew that if we built a network of people who were having lots of discussions online, and it was the thing that people thought about when they thought about comments or discussion, we're building something very powerful, especially for marketers who are looking for audiences that are otherwise very hard to find when they're trying to get their messages out there for certain brands. So if Pepsi wants to find a certain audience, or MTV wants to find a certain audience, these are people who are talking about this content online, and they're there talking about it with a lot of passion, with a lot of expertise. Disqus was really an access point for them to be found.
E quanto tempo, quanto tempo vi ci è voluto? Quanto avete girato con questa idea prima di trovare qualcuno che vi finanziasse, perché qua magari sono molto più abituati alle porte chiuse in faccia che non a quelli che accolgono a braccia aperte. Qua in Italia sto parlando. Voi quanto tempo siete andati in giro con questa idea prima di trovare chi finanziava?
Yeah, so we were doing Disqus. Disqus is a over 6-year-old company, so we've been doing it for some time, and there wasn't a big magical growth period. It took a while for it to take off, but the great thing is that we able to do it with very little resources, with very little initial capital invested into what we were building. That gave us a period of 1.5 years to really figure out how to get the right adoption. So the thing about Disqus and how we got started was really around word of mouth, and all we cared about and what our initial investors wanted us to focus on was building a really good user experience. And that experience was something where if we were building Disqus and people came to it and they went to a website that was not using Disqus, they would notice that and they would care about it and they would tell people to adopt our platform. And that was sort of our key intent. How were we able to get people to spread that via word of mouth? So that took a little bit of time. The initial marketing strategy from me was I went around and I made a list of 100 of my favorite websites online, and I manually contacted them, sent an email about 1 or 2 sentences to each person and talked about what I was doing, and I made it sound as if I was doing a small school project so they would listen to me. And I basically explained that, hey, I'm working on this fun little project, and if you were interested, would like for you to check it out. So of 100 people that I emailed, maybe about 10 or 12 actually responded to me, but it only took about 10 or 12 to actually start using Disqus, and then from there, people who would see it, it acted as a good word-of-mouth mechanism where it started to spread from there. So every site had a good audience around it, and every one of those people, if they had a website or a blog, they would find Disqus, and maybe they would adopt it as well. So the way that we built it was a really nice way to get a word-of-mouth. And then from there, one of the first things that we did from there was trying to figure out what the business was. And we didn't really know. And we tried a lot of different things, but the first thing we did was sort of a hosted software model where people would pay for using Disqus. And we never really cared about how much money we made. We mostly cared about distributing, getting people to use Disqus more. And because we didn't care about how much money we made, we were a very bad business. So we wanted to figure out what was the model where we were going to build Disqus to be a network and still be able to build a product that we wanted to build. And having a hosted software model wasn't very good for us because it meant that we had to kind of build it in a way that was, customizable and very powerful and flexible to certain publisher needs. And ultimately, we wanted to build a product that was very consistent and very easy to use for regular people. People like me, people like you, people that just come online and want to get their voice and voice online and participate. So by doing that, we wanted Disqus to be a recognizable product, something very consistent feeling. And ultimately, we went away from the hosted software model, and that's how we transitioned over a couple years to actually the advertising model as well. But it took a little bit of time, and over 6 years from when we started till today, in figuring out the right growth strategy, but also the right way of building the business around it.
Anche perché voi, come dire, siete entrati in un mercato, non siete stati i primi, c'erano già piattaforme e quindi appunto tu ci accennavi, sono state queste le idee, perché a un certo punto voi siete entrati in un mercato dove c'erano già altri concorrenti e poi siete comunque cresciuti in maniera esponenziale, arrivando quasi a sbaragliare totalmente la concorrenza. Qual è stato, in parte lo accennavi, qual è stato l'elemento che vi ha così proiettato verso questo successo e verso anche il superare anche molti dei vostri concorrenti?
So like I was saying, it wasn't huge inflection point growth right away. It took a little bit of time. And the key thing for us to fight our competitors was really being naive to how things worked. We weren't really daunted by what other people were doing because we were mostly ignoring that. And I think that sort of naivety and blindness really helped us because we weren't scared about the challenges. And that meant that all we need to do was focus on building the right product for our market. And ultimately, the number one thing for us is building an experience that allows us to find the right fit between our product and the market itself. Not caring about, how to find the differentiated strategy and how to attack our competitors in a savvy way. All we cared about was building the experience for users where they preferred it, and whenever they came across our competitors' products, they would talk about how, terrible they were. So that was the key for us. It was building something directly for regular people to use, and being obsessed with that polish and with that experience. And I think one of the differentiating factors, as I mentioned before, is instead of building something as a tool for websites, as a tool for journalism, we built it as a way to talk to commenters and participants and say, this is why you want to talk about this. This is why it's interesting for you to talk about this content. And websites really found that powerful because they were able to access the audience that were already talking about these topics and their content anywhere on the web, and they were doing that on Disqus, and by using Disqus they were being connected to that.
Ecco, parlavamo degli utenti, scusate, dei commentatori. Voi che dati chiedete quando un user si registra? Credo semplicemente il nome, che può essere fatto tramite anche un account social, il nome che può essere il nome vero o anche uno pseudonimo, oppure anche in forma anonima. E in più l'email, sono questi i dati che avete, come tutti questi dati le proteggete, come le conservate, che uso ne fate, immagino anche un uso commerciale, e tutti questi dati, che valore economico per voi hanno?
So people on Disqus participate via 3 different ways. They can use their real name, which is verified by Facebook. They can be completely anonymous, where they don't leave any information with Disqus at all. And they could use pseudonyms, which is the most popular way, essentially using an online handle. So instead of being Daniel Ha, I can use a screen name that I use online. And we promote pseudonyms as the number one way of using Disqus. We did a study a little while ago that measures the quality signals between how people use their real names versus how they use a pseudonym. And we saw that the quality between pseudonyms and real names are, the difference between those things are non-existent for us. They're very close. But the volume of people talking with pseudonyms is so much higher because people are so much more comfortable using a online handle where they can choose how to express themselves. So it's sort of like wearing a different set of clothes in a different situation. You can kind of choose the way you express yourself, and you feel much more comfortable doing that. And we realized, and people think that using a real name guarantees higher quality and guarantees more authenticity. But looking at our data, it doesn't show it to be the case. And the data for us, the data in Disqus is a powerful asset for us. We use data in a lot of different ways, but primarily in a way that informs how we build the experience for users. So what we store, what people register for Disqus is, simply the name they choose to use, whether it's real or not, the email address that they use to register the account, and profile information, their picture, and any information they want to store with us. And this data is pretty sacred for us, right? We don't share personally identifiable information. Online communities is a super sensitive thing because people are not just talking about school or work. They're talking about some things that they're very passionate about, either very personal stories, things that they're excited about or scared about. These are things that they may not want to put their real name to. So these sort of things, when they are registering with Disqus, it's something that we hold very, very closely. In terms of using that data, Disqus is a network where we built a advertising platform as well. So this is a valuable set of data for us to make a good ad platform for our marketers. So we use that to help them target the right sort of people, but we don't let them see exactly who they're targeting to. So there's nothing personally identifiable. And aside from that, you know, the nature of online comments in these communities is it's very, very public. It's like going to a public forum and seeing what people post. So the content we make accessible, people can sort of find that and use that content very freely. But we do, you know, we're very, very vigilant about protecting the identities and the personally identifiable information around it.
E avete avuto mai problemi? Avete mai avuto problemi su questo, sul versante della protezione dei dati? Mi sembra l'anno scorso c'è stato un giornalista svedese, un reporter che indagava su dei siti di estrema destra, che ha detto che attraverso una vostra API ha raggiunto diversi indirizzi di mail. Come avete risolto questo problema? Cosa è successo?
Yeah, so this comes up very often. When it comes down to data surveillance and how people treat that, there's a lot of cases that we've had to address and respond to. So the case you're talking about, it was I believe it was a Swedish journalist, and you know what happened was they had access to a lot of email addresses from a different service. I think it was a data leak from Adobe where they had sort of a list of thousands of email addresses. And what they did was they went around to different social services. So Disqus is one of them, and they went and tried to match those email addresses with what is called a MD5 hashed version of our emails. So we use a sort of a hashed or a obscured version of email addresses to you know, find pictures and avatars of people on our service. So what they did was sort of did a pattern matching and went around Disqus to find that. And it's sort of similar to kind of seeing, it's sort of like just Googling someone's name and trying to find their picture on Google image search and finding a match and you know, tracing that back to something. So it took a lot of work on their end to kind of make that trace. And they were basically extracting a lot of public content around Disqus, and it was a little bit of API abuse. So what we've done since then was reaffirm our API policy. We've banned their access to that, and we've made it more difficult for people to do that sort of pattern matching.
Quindi siete molto più attenti su questo versante adesso.
Yeah, it's you know, at the end of the day, this content is very public, and you can find it in various ways. And sometimes you can pull information and abuse how API information is available. So we're learning from that. Every time it does come up, we want to make sure that the ways that we think people are using it are the ways they're actually using it, and that when they are abusing it, that we address it right away.
Senti, sempre sul versante invece del model business, voi avete recentemente lanciato questi sponsored comments. Me ne parli un po', perché questo ricorda un po' i contenuti sponsorizzati, quello che vengono chiamate native advertising, su cui anche sul giornalismo se ne sta molto parlando. Alcuni grossi siti, anche il New York Times, Corriere della Sera qua, hanno addirittura fatto una ristrutturazione grafica del loro sito, proprio si dice per accogliere questo tipo nuovo di contenuti. Però si parla ovviamente anche come di un rischio, un pericolo, no? Di questi contenuti che entrano dentro il normale flusso delle notizie, in questo caso dei commenti, e quindi in qualche modo possono disorientare, comunque non essere chiari, e quindi con un calo di fiducia chiaramente da parte dei lettori. So che voi ci avete pensato un po' prima di adottarle, anche adesso l'avete adottata in forma, diciamo, comunque sperimentale, cioè ci andate abbastanza cauti, però se ce ne parlavi un po', perché è molto interessante su come vi state muovendo anche voi su questo fronte.
Yeah, so our ad platform was just launched about 1.5 years ago, and the goal is really to provide our advertisers a way to reach Disqus users, and the publishers that are using our platform will get paid as well. So ultimately, it's a way for websites, publishers, media companies to make money from their comments and their online communities. And the first thing we launched worked really well, and it was really about putting advertising against different types of content and driving traffic to whatever advertisers want to drive traffic to. And this made publishers a lot of money. So we were happy about that. But ultimately, we knew that we wanted to evolve this ad platform and try different types of products as well, and try different things that matches the ways that people use comments online. The thing that we realized on day one is that the best type of advertising is no advertising. So we can't fool ourselves and try to build a value-add advertising service. But we wanted to build advertising that was not crap, and we wanted to build advertising that was very valuable for both advertisers and for publishers. So the next step, the thing that we're experimenting with, is this idea of sponsored comments. We built this feature a few months ago called featured comments, where essentially inside the conversation thread, publishers were featuring the most popular comments so that it appears at the very top. And these comments would get the most engagement. People would respond about 5 times as much. People would vote on it about 15 times as much. And people would see it 50 times as much. So the engagement and how we were measuring it meant that any sort of content that wanted to be promoted within that conversation thread, publishers could do that, and it would get a lot more visibility. So we use that space to introduce this concept of a sponsored comment, where some of these featured comments would be sponsored by advertisers, marketers, in the right place at the right time. So it's targeted based on the content around that, but also on how people are behaving across sites. We knew that when people were on a site that's talking about sports, you can display sports advertising, but if that community goes also to a entertainment-related site, but that community is also very interested in sports, we could also see that across sites and help advertisers reach those people. So it's a very powerful concept. But the whole notion around sponsored content and native advertising, I think is a little bit dangerous as well, because if you try to make it feel tricky and make it feel like it is part of the content itself, people lose trust in what is displayed. So our goal is to make it feel native to the Disqus experience, and that means it just feels like part of how people are already using Disqus, but not make it not known as advertising. It has to be very clearly denoted, has to be very clearly seen as a marketer message. So at the end of the day, the goal is to be non-obtrusive and to be very clear and honest with advertising, because that's the only way that users will trust it past day one.
E i primi risultati, lo accennavi, sono buoni come partecipazione?
The first results are good. We've mostly been trying it based on how users receive it, whether or not people hate it, whether or not people will engage with these things. So a sponsored comment right now, mostly, I'll give you an example. So a sponsored comment could be Disney, who has a video trailer that they want to put out for a movie that's coming out. And we'll find certain communities around movies or entertainment or celebrities, and we'll put that comment in line for those users. And it will be a video trailer. People can view that in line, and they can also buy that movie tickets right there. So it allows them to basically target the right folks. Our whole goal is to make sure that we're building a experience that people will actually play with, and if they don't dislike. And we've had many iterations, and some things that we've tried were terrible, and some things were getting better. But for how advertisers were getting value, we've seen a lot of great results so far.
Tu adesso parlavi di anche user experience, no? Di come, sui commenti ci sono vari esperimenti in giro su come anche gestirli, ma anche proprio a livello di grafica, di collocazione nell'articolo. Ad esempio il New York Times per alcuni articoli, o Quartz, che è questo sito economico, oppure Medium, che è molto conosciuta, un'altra piattaforma che è ancora molto conosciuta, hanno cominciato a sperimentare questa forma che loro chiamano annotazioni, cioè in corrispondenza del singolo paragrafo si può aprire una finestra e commentare solo il paragrafo, per cui il commento non è più in fondo all'articolo, ma è accanto al paragrafo. Oppure Kinja, che è questo Gawker Media, sta sperimentando da diversi anni anche lì la collocazione diversa, l'interazione diversa tra chi scrive l'articolo con l'utente. E voi stessi recentemente avete lanciato questi featured comment dove è possibile mettere dei video, delle foto dentro, l'utente può, oltre al commento, mettere anche foto e video. Nel senso, mi sembra ci sia nel complesso tutta, come dire, una serie di esperimenti per ripensare come usufruire i commenti, no? Qualcuno tempo fa ha detto bisogna anche reinventarli, bisogna reinventare, una frase che mi aveva colpito, bisogna reinventare la ruota, no? Nel senso che questi commenti devono essere anche un po' ripensati. Allora ti volevo chiedere cosa ne pensi anche di questi esperimenti che vengono fatti, come vi state muovendo e se all'interno di Disqus in qualche modo, oltre ad esserci ricerca e sviluppo, mi immagino sui software, sulla sicurezza, c'è anche ricerca e sviluppo, come dire, sul concetto, sul reinventare la ruota, se c'è qualcuno che sta pensando anche come, no? Mettere in maniera diversa il commento.
So one of the things that we learned, working on this last few years is that, as commenting software, when you think about how to build a perfect online community, it doesn't really come down to the software. It comes down to how you use it. All the things that make up a good online community are very human things. So whether or not you have the right community leadership, whether or not you have the right community rules and guidelines, and whether or not you have a personality to that community, right? You have a certain tone. So, to that respect, I think the environment for how these comments exist are very, very important. And whether it's at the bottom of the page or on the side or wherever it is, it's really, there's no one size fits all when it comes to how comments should be displayed. It should be used in a way that actually makes sense for that community, for those publishers, and respond to how the audience want to interact with it. There's some places where you're not going to have a lot of heavy engagement where people are going to talk and write really long paragraphs, a lot of text. Some people are going to do very lightweight things like vote on things or post images or video, and you have to play to that. You have to build an experience that makes sense for your audiences and your users. And I think the really interesting stuff that I've seen, for example, Medium is a very essay-driven site, so it feels very much like a one-way broadcast, which is important for them. And I think that there are sites where you wanted to make it feel like one editor's voice that comes across and that people are responding with feedback rather than comments. Other places feel a lot more like a discussion forum where the content is really just a question or a prompt for more people to respond to and talk about. And we've seen Disqus used very well in that respect. Kinja, which is Gawker's new thing, is really cool, and I think it's one of the most interesting examples of what people have been doing. And what they're doing is essentially trying to do community-driven journalism where they write stories but try to get people to participate and then promote them from within and make them feel like the journalists themselves. And ultimately, they want most of the stories and most of the reporting to come from that community and almost make it feel like a forum-driven news site. And I think that's very cool. That's not going to work for everyone. It really depends on the sort of feel and personality that you want your site to take on. For us, we want comments to change significantly. I think the sort of idea of comments being at the bottom of the page is a very old notion. It's a very old paradigm. And we want that to go away. And one of the difficult things is that we work with a lot of different publishers, and these publishers are used to a certain layout. They're used to a certain dynamic, and we play into that. But if we really wanted to change things up, we'd build Disqus in a way where the experience is much more focused on the user and on the discussion, rather than focused as a response to an article. Because I think the best uses of community are where the responses and the discussion are more interesting than the story itself, and it sort of takes a life on of its own. So for us, like what we're focused on building right now is sort of a consumer experience. So we think about mobile. We're thinking about a Disqus.com where people can find content directly and have discussions directly with content, and ultimately drive that value back to publishers as well.
Io, dopo questo primo giro di domande mie, visto che poi siamo in due qua e stiamo parlando di interazione e di comunità, se ci sono già delle domande dal pubblico farei già un primo giro, poi ho altri argomenti.
Ciao, sono Luca. Mi piacerebbe sapere qual è il futuro di Disqus. Essere acquisito da un grosso gruppo oppure rimanere indipendente. E se, adesso non voglio sapere cose segrete, ma se dovesse sposarsi con qualcuno, Disqus, quale sarebbe la tua sposa preferita?
Ci sono altre domande?
So, I don't know. I don't know the future, but I know what we're doing right now. And right now we're really focused on finding out the future for how people interact with Disqus. You know, we realize that we have about, we have about 1.4 billion unique visitors to our network every month, but only about 35 million people are registered with Disqus. We have about less than 10 million of those registered accounts that are super active every month. And there's a huge gap in between what people can be doing on Disqus and what people are generally interacting with the service when they see it every day. So we're really focused on building right now a consumer experience, which means that people can wake up in the morning and they can use Disqus to find things they want to talk about. And if they wake up in the morning, they want to talk about food or fashion or cars, they can use Disqus to go do that. And so we have a few products right now that are focused on making that happen. Essentially, Disqus today is a very fragmented network of online communities and discussion. And we've been so obsessed with the idea of connecting that together in a powerful way for our users, but really because of the publishers are getting value out of more comments and more quality comments, we want to build Disqus in a way where if users are better able to find these discussions and to engage with this content, the publishers can ultimately get much more value as well through traffic, engagement, user acquisition, and all the things that matter to them. You know, ultimately in the future, you know, we think we can do so much more as an independent company. That's the dream, right? To stay independent and to pursue that mission. You know, we sort of sit in a really fun spot in between tech platforms and online media. So between companies that are sort of, you know, technology focused, and then the ones that are focused completely on digital media. So we're somewhere right in between. And we have great relationships with both companies in both camps. But right now we're doing something that I think is very different than what's been done before, and our path is different from what people have done before. So we want to keep pushing on that for a long time.
E una delle prossime sfide, parliamo di futuro, può essere la cura dei contenuti. Se ne sta parlando molto anche per il giornalismo, no? Quando si parla che i giornalisti devono essere sempre più curatori di contenuti. Voi, tutta questa massa di commenti, veramente un sacco di commenti, quindi c'è anche forse la necessità di poterli utilizzare anche per capire cosa di realmente valido c'è dentro e farlo emergere. Credo che questa sia una, no, come dire, delle vostre grandi sfide del futuro, su quali siete anche concentrati.
Around curation. Curation is sort of a funny thing for us. We actually don't care that much about like finding social like interactions from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and pulling that into one place. We care a lot more about a publisher being able to build their own identity and build their own audience. And that means for people who really care to talk about food and you're writing about food, we want to match those people together and want them to come there and build the personality of them for their own on that site. And it's really important because the environment, again, is what defines a publisher. For the content they write, sometimes it can be very commodity. And that means that they're breaking news or they're writing about things that a lot of other people are writing about. But the thing that sets them apart is the sort of tone and personality and the brand of the editors, the journalists, and really the community as well. When you come to a site and there's certain voices that you recognize, whether that's the voice of the original post or the voice of the community around it and how they respond, that's what sets you apart from one of your competitors as a journalist. So for curation, I find that less important than actually being able to build experiences where people want to come and build a community on your own site.
E che tipo di strategia è stato utilizzato per questo? Te lo chiedo perché a settembre scorso un concorrente vostro, che è Livefire, ha acquistato una piattaforma di social media curation molto famosa molto apprezzata fra i giornalisti, che era Storyfy. Come avete visto questo tipo di operazione da parte di un vostro concorrente? Cosa voi concretamente fate su questo versante della curation? E se vi interessa, cioè anche tutta quella che è la discussione, per esempio, utilizzata sui social media.
Yeah, so I think it was a kind of interesting move. Our competitor Livefire bought Storify to kind of expand their suite of publisher tools. Now that's a direction that is great for them, but it's not a direction that we take. We don't really care that much about building really good tools for publishers per se. We care about building them a community however it takes. So our strategy there is really to focus on, again, the consumer side. When we build consumer products, it's all about building a hub, a Disqus.com, or a mobile application where people are finding this content, they're discovering this content, and they're talking about it, and then we can connect them to publisher sites. So we care less about building different types of tools for publishers to use and sort of curate content. And I think Livefire and other companies like them provide great tools for that. For us, we want to build very, very simple to use, easy community software where when people are using Disqus, it allows people who are passionate about a certain topic to go find that directly.
C'è un'altra domanda ancora di Luca, voleva fare.
This time in English. How mobile is changing the landscape? You said you want to evolve Disqus like a way to find conversations, interesting communities about the topics that people care. So my personal experience is, thanks to mobile and applications like Pocket, I read a lot of news on Pocket and not on websites, especially on mobile and tablet. So do you think you need an app to aggregate the conversation? So what's your strategy about mobile?
Right. So we're developing one right now, and it's a little bit different because we don't think that you can just kind of take Disqus as a comment system and move it to mobile. It doesn't work very well because, as you said, that's not how people use. That's not how they browse content on their phones. The way that we want to approach it is to really build a different application, really not even under the Disqus name, but to build something that is on top of the Disqus platform. Ultimately, we want to be a general discussion platform where we can build different products that provide good discussion experiences. So the first app that we're building that we hope to release later this year is all around phone conversations. So phone conversations are interesting because you're not going to type 3 paragraphs while waiting for the bus or write 3 paragraphs while waiting for your table at the restaurant. But you want to read stories and you want to say things in very short ways. So we want to build an experience that plays into that very well. So what we're doing is still early, but I'm really excited about this direction because I think no one's really nailed this type of conversational activity in a small screen device that's not just sort of free form, either personal chat or just context-less Twitter where you're just saying what you're doing or doing status updates. So I think it's a very hard challenge to knock out, and that's what we're pursuing right now. I think building after this direction, building good consumer experiences is really the key for us to build more value to our network of publishers rather than building the tool side.
Ci sono altre domande del pubblico?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
So you started in 2007, so you've seen, you know, the pendulum for content like swing, you know, one way and the other. Right now we're in a period of like big excitement, you know, big investments,
Yep.
with lots of like, you know, all sorts of journalistic startups come along. What's a view, you know, from your perspective, like, you know, a year or two down the line, what's going to happen with content? Is it going to be like atomized, you know, just like little social objects, or you see like the rise of something new that we can't see?
I sort of my view on this is a little bit unhealthy for Disqus as a whole. I sort of see the landscape for embeddable widgets shrinking over time. So when we started, we built off the widget ecosystem where everyone was starting, you know, it was very easy for you to get online by starting blogs, and these platforms are open, so you would sort of extend it by, you know, building applications on top of these blogs. And these were called widgets, and Disqus is a widget. I think ultimately you kind of fast forward to the future, call it a year, call it 2 years or 3 years, and people who would normally start blogs to either, you know, start a small business or share stories of their trips, these people, these individuals, I think they have a lot more options in how to get online. So, you know, maybe today they may start a blog around their bakery, and tomorrow it may be an Instagram account. And perhaps if you were a person trying to get some voice and presence online, you start a blog a few years ago, and today you do that on Twitter. So ultimately, I think individuals, as a whole, there's going to be a lot more of a streamlined approach to getting presence online. You don't need to, just like with blogs, you didn't have to kind of create your own HTML and design your own website. In the future, you're not going to have to like own your own domain. You're not going to have to create your own space just for the type of presence that you want online. Of course, a lot of people will still have blogs. They'll never go away. But for individuals, whether you're just a mother, want to share experiences, or someone who wants to put photos online or share videos, there's so many different, very specific services for these verticals that make it much easier for you to do that. So that means overall, the landscape for you know, comment systems and customizable plugins for blogs, I think that is now focused on major media publishers, so that shrinks the overall market overall. So I think the way that people will have discussions on these sites, it's going to have to be through a bunch of different disparate communities. And I think what publishers need to do is really tap into that, because no matter what you're talking about or whatever you're publishing online, people are going to have these discussions, whether or not you want them to, and they're going to happen on disparate communities and disparate services. So working with Disqus or anything like Disqus where you're able to plug into that and get value from it, I think it's going to be key, because people are going to have these conversations whether you want them or not.
Credo ci sia anche, come dire, voi avete dovuto risolvere un grosso problema di, come si dice, scalabilità, perché avevate avuto dover gestire grandissimi siti tipo quello della CNN a piccole comunità, il piccolo blog, a proposito di quello che dicevi. Adesso è ora andare addirittura sul mobile, quindi una dimensione ancora più piccola per certi versi.
Yeah, so you're talking about scalability. Can you repeat that?
Yes. Che tipo di problemi avete trovato nel dover fornire una piattaforma per siti tipo CNN, quindi molto grossi, sia per piccoli siti?
Right. So the disparate type of communities, they have very different problems, right? The small sites, they are trying to get more conversations, they're trying to get more comments, and a site like CNN already has so much, they're trying to get rid of all the shitty ones, they're trying to make it, trying to get high quality things out. So it ends up being very different problems, very different tones you have to work with. On CNN, it's you know, initially, or like large website, initially was trying to deal with scale, and you know, some of that is just technological. So every time there's a big story, you know, a celebrity dies or a big uprising happens around the world, there's a lot of traffic that comes in, and we have to kind of deal with that. But ultimately, the biggest problems with the conversation space is like the type of reactions people have on a site, a general news site like CNN is so broad. And we have to build the right tools so that for them to kind of like surface the best quality discussions. And it's not just taking away obscenities and swear words and spam, but it's for them to highlight any sort of consistent quality tone within that conversation and pull it out. And that's hard for a general news site to do. In a smaller website, it's easier for them because it's much more narrowly focused, and you have people that come there and they know exactly what they want to talk about. They're very interested in that. But the key thing there, the challenges there is to get more of them, to find more of them, and to get them talking more. So it's they have two different sides of the spectrum and what they're trying to do. At the end of the day, it's about finding the audience that's right for them.
Un'altra mia curiosità è tutta questa massa di dati, sia degli user, sia di tutti i commenti. Avete i vostri server, quanto spazio occupano, dove li mettete, e se tutti questi dati che poi trafficano attraverso i commenti, tutti questi dati sono vostri, per esempio sul sito della CNN le condividete, è una feature che date in più a pagamento, come funziona? E quanto anche spazio fisico vi occupano?
The physical space. Where is it actually stored? So Disqus is a hosted service, so we store it all on our servers, and we have servers around the country, around the world for that service. And ownership is really interesting. When you think about like who owns what online, it all comes down to like what the services make very clear in their terms of service. And for us, all the content flows through the Disqus service. So we know that we have a lot of responsibility in how we treat that. We make it very clear in our terms of service when we work with publishers that the sort of content that goes through here, they should be able to do what they need to do with it, just like if people are posting directly to their site. At the same time, we built Disqus to be a consumer service, and that means that we want to have that ownership really shared with whoever wrote it. So that becomes kind of tricky at times, and we wrote a lot of really granular rules around the shared ownership between what people are displaying on their sites as publishers and what control they have there versus what control a user has, because they're the ones that spent the time writing it. They should own it. They can take it away whenever they want. Good. Even if someone's deleted their comment, they can go find it later on and restore it for a different use case. And I think that's really key because Disqus ends up being that intermediary between what publishers are publishing as comments and what users are posting as their own content. So we want to make it feel like it's their own things that they're writing.
Esatto. E questo, come dire, voi lo condividete anche appunto come servizio aggiuntivo, penso magari per i grandi siti, a fronte anche di un compenso economico, oppure no? Certo.
We don't sell that information. We don't. We're not building a business off people accessing that information. It is freely available for how publishers are using Disqus and how consumers when they post. So when I post a comment, it's in my profile. I can always access it no matter what. Is that your question?
Okay.
Yeah.
Allora, mi fanno segno che il tempo sta quasi finendo, o è finito, anche se abbiamo preso un po' in ritardo. Se c'è un'ultimissima domanda veloce, la facciamo.
Volevo sapere di più sulla moderazione, se era un compito, diciamo, del gestore del sito o loro. E un'altra. Come mai vengono, diciamo, eliminati certi commenti e altri no?
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest questions. We always took a non-editorial stance to Disqus. We know communities are very different across sites. Disqus has set its own standards across these sites, but we want to build the right tools so publishers can set that standard. I think moderation is super key. If you want to build any sort of community with your participants, you have to be involved. You can't just put comments there and expect it to be good and for things to happen from that. The way I think about it is it's like an event, or it's like doing a meetup. You need the host. You need someone to really like curate the people and start the conversations and make sure the conversations are on point. So it's like a panel as well. You need someone to kind of lead that conversation and people to respond to it. I think the communities that are most successful is when that moderation and that sort of community leadership comes from the community itself. So people start to take their own tone around it. When people simply delete comments and moderate comments without any sort of participation and not explaining it, that creates a big rift in how people understand and trust that community, and I think that's a challenge as well. And ultimately, these are very human things. It's not through the software, and we have to train people to use that better within Disqus. For us, we don't make that decision. We don't take anything down. We want to make sure that every community is very different. Sometimes it's very serious, it's very well spoken, and these are very high quality communities, and sometimes they're very fun. They're very wild and frenetic, and they're just all over the place, and that should be okay too.
Bene, allora abbiamo sforato i 6 minuti. Io ringrazio tutti, ringrazio Daniel di essere stato qui con noi. Ringrazio soprattutto chi è venuto qui a ascoltarci per un'ora, a partecipare. Grazie a tutti, grazie veramente. Arrivederci.
Thank you so much.